Hi, I'm Chef Deborah from Rokus Bakery in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today we're going to be making pumpkin pie ravioli, which is a dessert ravioli and something a lot of people have never had before, but it's been a family favorite of ours and at the bakery as well, and in some of the restaurants that I've worked at as a chef. So we're going to go ahead and start with our basic dough, which is 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, a ½ teaspoon of salt. We've got a ½ cup of hot water and 2 eggs that have been beaten together. So we're going to go ahead and combine all of this together and make a dough. I'm not going to roll this by hand today. We're going to use our KitchenAid attachment and roll it out just to make it a lot easier. I know a lot of people during the COVID shutdown started to learn how to make pasta, sourdough bread, and different things like that. And this is one of those things that you can do either by hand or you can do with a KitchenAid machine. So we want to have a nice cohesive dough. Let me just check to see. Sometimes your flour can be a little bit dry. So when I say a ½ cup of warm water, it might take a little bit more than that. Or if your flour is a fairly hydrated flour, you have a lot of moisture in your house where your flour is being stored, you might not take quite as much water as a ½ cup, maybe a tablespoon less. This looks like it was coming together pretty good. So we're just going to head and dump it out on the counter. And we'll just knead it a few times just to bring the dough together. We don't need to knead it like bread because there's no yeast or anything in this. We don't want to activate the gluten too much because the machine will actually do the kneading, all of that for us, but we just want it to come together to a smooth dough so that we can cut it and then start rolling it out. So for the pumpkin pie filling, we're going to have about maybe 3/4 cup of good pumpkin puree. Now in the bakery, we make our own. We actually buy pie pumpkins and the sweet ones, and we bake them off and then we puree the filling and then strain it usually 24 hours through cheesecloth to make sure all the water gets out. So if you have fresh pumpkin that you've baked off yourself and pureed, you want a nice smooth puree, you need to drain it to make sure that it doesn't look watery. And if your pumpkin even out of a can looks watery, please just put it a little bit of cheesecloth or a coffee filter, even if you don't have cheesecloth, in a strainer. A strainer is something like this, just so that you can see what it is. So it has a lot of little holes in it, so you can put a coffee filter and put the pumpkin in that and put it over a bowl and let any excess water drain out so that your pumpkin pie filling isn't too watery. Then we've got about 3 ounces of cream cheese and about 3 tablespoons of brown sugar for the filling that we'll put together in just a little bit. So see, we've got our dough. It's nice and hydrated. Just going to put a little flour down and just let it sit since we kneaded it a little bit, and we're going to let this dough relax and let the gluten fibers in the dough relax a little bit so it's easier to roll. So while that's just sitting for a couple minutes, we're going to go ahead and make our filling. And this comes together really, really fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to be boiling these raviolis. We're not baking them, we're actually going to boil them, which is probably something different than what you thought we were going to do. And this is something that you don't want to put together and let sit in the refrigerator for like a day. You can make this ahead, maybe 4 hours ahead of when you're going to boil, but make sure that you put a lot of flour underneath the ravioli and cover them with plastic wrap and flour the top of the ravioli before you cover. And keep them in the refrigerator. Otherwise the pasta dough will get soggy and it can break when it's boiling in the water, and you don't want that. So it is something that you really do need to kind of make the day of, not too far before, and just keep in the refrigerator, like I said, floured and covered until you're ready to boil them up and make your caramel sauce, because we're going to be doing a delicious, quick, easy caramel sauce that you can put together in just minutes. And we're going to toast some pecans and serve it that way. I did this for a Christmas party last year. No one at the party had ever had pumpkin ravioli before. It was one of the first things that was gone off the buffet line, so it was a big hit. You can also make this a little bit savory And instead of making a caramel sauce and adding cream cheese, you can put like 1 egg in the pumpkin and a little bit, just a little bit of sugar and some cinnamon. You can actually use some fresh sage leaves and a little bit of brown sugar and butter in the sauce and make it a little bit sweet and savory, so it can be like an appetizer for a dinner, which is a nice switch up, especially in the fall when the pumpkins are fresh. Okay, to my pumpkin mix, what I did was I added about a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, a teaspoon of cinnamon, about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, or you can use a pumpkin pie spice, or spice it however you want. This is a pumpkin pie kind of spice, so that's what you would want to go with. So I just got my whip to break up the cream cheese a little bit, so you see the mixture is pretty stiff. At this point, we don't want to add any eggs or anything like that to the mixture. Then we're going to add our brown sugar. If the pumpkin is really sweet, especially if you're making your own pumpkin, you might want to taste it. Since there's no raw eggs in it, it will be safe even for mommies to taste, just to make sure that you're not getting it overly sweet, because remember, we're going to be serving this with a caramel sauce. So let me get a spoon real quick and just taste it to see if it's too sweet or not. It actually needs a little bit more, so we're probably going to add the rest of that. You want to be sure you know how it's going to taste. You've got the spices right. If you want to add a little bit more cinnamon or whatever, this is the time to do it, because once you start making the ravioli, you obviously can't change anything about that. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside, and we're going to start working on our pasta dough. So we're just going to cut this in 4s. Now, if you don't have a KitchenAid attachment like I do here, you will have to roll this by hand. And let me show you how to do it by hand, just so that you see. So we want to roll it in a sheet. So we want to try and hand roll it in an oblong shape if we can keep it that way. And rolling pasta by hand, which is what I used to do all the time before KitchenAid came out with all these wonderful attachments that we can use. I still have my grandmother's, let me see if I can find it here. My grandmother's old pasta cutter. That's what she used to use, and a knife. One time, like a couple weeks ago, I was going to make some fresh pasta for my husband and I didn't want to get out my pasta machine, and I said, oh, I'll just roll it by hand. And I used grandma's cutters, and of course grandma's cutters aren't nearly as sharp as they used to be. And I thought, oh my, this is a lot of work. So I quickly went back to my trusted KitchenAid attachment. But if you don't have one of those, this is certainly a good workout for your arms. But you want to keep rolling it and making sure that the dough doesn't stick to the board, to your board or your counter. And it's going to start sticking a little bit there. We want to flour. We don't want it to be super thin, because this is a wet mixture, and we want it to be a little bit thicker. Like on the KitchenAid attachment, I'll roll it to number 5. I won't go to number 6, which is what I usually stop at when I'm making my homemade pasta, which is a lot thinner than a number 5. So I'll stop at number 5. This particular recipe for those who have the KitchenAid. So as you can see, it's not super perfect, but we're going to fold it over itself when we fill it. So I'll just do it both ways so that you can see. It's basically easy. It just requires some little arm work. But look at that little piece of dough, and it still probably could be rolled out a little bit thinner, because you can't quite see my hands through it yet. So we'll give it a couple more passes with the rolling pin. I know when we used to make pasta, we had long, it was like a broomstick handle, and that was clean, of course, brand new, and we would never use it for anything else but in the kitchen. And we'd roll pasta, you know, as long as this countertop with that, and all the aunts and the nonas, and they'd get together and do that, and it was like watching a bunch of musicians perform together. So this is about as thin as what we would want to go. As you can see, you can kind of see my hands through it. It doesn't tear if you hold it like this. It's going to stay together, so it's the gluten's been activated nicely, but not too much. So we're just going to set this aside, and then I'll show you how to fill it when we start filling the other ones. So now we're going to go ahead and process this dough through the machine. And I'm going to be turning the machine on, so I won't be speaking while the machine is going, because you won't be able to hear me. It's just be a lot of racket. So I'm just going to go ahead and start passing this through the machine, and we'll go to number 5 and then we'll stop there. So as soon as I get that done, I'll be back with you and we'll start filling our raviolis. So I've rolled out all of our pasta dough, and as you can see, we've got some beautiful nice sheets here, and we're going to go ahead and start filling. I did trim off the edges just to make them more even, and also with the hand rolled piece that I did and some of the ends that I trimmed off, what I did was I just folded it over and just cut it into nice fettuccine noodles, and we can just put it to the side. I floured it really well, floured the noodles, or the noodles really well, and you can just let it dry out for a little while because the hand rolled was a little bit thicker, and you can freeze it at this point and pull it out whenever you want to, or save it for supper tonight and make some nice marinara sauce and serve it with some great crusty bread. So we're going to go back to our ravioli. So what we're going to do is we're going to be laying our pumpkin down one side, and we're going to actually fold it over. So we're not going to be cutting this in two, so it's going to be a really easy thing to do. So you can do a spoon, or you can do it like a little 1 teaspoon scoop, which I find to be really easy. But before we do that, let's go ahead and egg wash the ends or the sides, just so that they stick well together, because you don't want these popping open at all during the cooking time, so that you lose all your good filling. So we want to be sure that that's all nice and glued down. And we're just going to lay down just the tiniest of a scoop right there. And we can just keep going down the row, making our little raviolis. Now, if you want to make these bigger, you can certainly do that. But again, this is a dessert ravioli, so with a sweet caramel sauce, you don't necessarily want to make them really huge. You can make one big ravioli if you want to do that, and that way you would just take probably 2 tablespoons full and just put it down the center of one of these big sheets and put another sheet on top of it, rather than making them small. But I like to serve them a little bit smaller. That way you can put 3 or 4 on your dessert bowl with the caramel sauce, and I think I'll wait on that one. And you have a nice little presentation. So we're just going to go ahead and fold this over ever so gently to the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just take and try and press the air out around the pumpkin, because air pockets can cause it to burst. So before we actually stamp them and seal them, we want to be sure that there's no real air pocket in there. And then we'll stamp and seal them and we'll be good to go. So see, I mean, it's a nice, quick, easy thing to do. It's not difficult at all. The hardest part is making the pasta dough. And if you've never made the pasta dough, you saw that wasn't hard either. So it can be a nice, quick, easy dessert to put together, something special. So you can use, this is a ravioli stamp. So this is an average size ravioli. It's square, or you can get a larger, round ravioli. This would be, obviously for like you would serve 1 or 2 on a dessert bowl rather than 3 or 4. So we're going to use the little squares, and what you do is you just center the handle over the center of the filling and just stamp it out. And you have your little ravioli. And just lay it on a floured sheet pan. And so you just continue going down the line like that until you get it all done. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish stamping out our raviolis and getting them on our floured tray, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. So we're back with our pumpkin ravioli. We've made all of our ravioli, stamped them out. They've been resting on a floured board. We're going to go ahead and make the caramel sauce right now. So I've got 4 ounces of butter. We're going to put In a pan, we've got about 2.5 tablespoons of brown sugar. We'll let the butter melt first before we add the brown sugar. And I've already got water boiling, and I've got a strainer inside a bowl ready for our ravioli, so that we don't have to stop and in the middle of something get everything, what the French call mise en place, which is having everything in its place, which is what we were taught in pastry school, to have all of our ingredients and all of our utensils out that we need so that we don't have to stop in the middle of something. And most of the time I can do that, but sometimes we're doing things in a hurry and on the fly, and we just have to make it work. So we're going to, now this is a brown butter sauce, kind of a caramel sauce without the heavy cream in it. So it's just really brown butter and sugar, and we're then going to put in some pecans. You can toast or not toast. Toasting always brings out the flavor in the pecans. So we're going to go ahead and add our brown sugar, and we're going to we have to turn the top on to cook the brown sugar in the butter. So we want to cook it long enough so that it becomes a very cohesive sauce. And sometimes the brown sugar and the butter don't like to mix real well. They don't want to hold hands and say, let's get together. They just want to kind of stay separate. But we just take our whisk and force them to join hands and create this really nice sauce. It doesn't take long. It comes together really quick. And this is something that you want to do kind of at the last minute. And you sit it on and you can set it off to the side and then mix it well together to re-emulsify it before you plate it on your plate. And again, remember I told you you can make this kind of a sweet savory dish as well by adding some fresh sage into the sauce at the very last minute, a couple of sprigs of fresh sage. I don't think you can see it, but it's bubbling up really nice. It's becoming caramely looking, if that's the word. It's changing color just a little bit. We want it to be a kind of a medium toasty brown color. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this convection oven off here, the stovetop, and we're going to let it calm down. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to set this to the side. I'm going to bring the water that's been boiling over here so you can see me do this. And it's only going to take a couple of minutes to boil these ravioli. It doesn't take long at all. So let me go get the water real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, so we've got our water here now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our ravioli by the tip, and we're just going to swish it and let it go. We don't want to just throw them in. We just want to gently place and be very careful. This isn't something for the kids to do. We don't want to boil this super hard either, like a medium boil, because you don't want them to boil so hard that they burst open. These are very delicate, so I can boil maybe in this quart pan maybe 4 or 5 at a time. So we're just going to let them go ahead and do their thing. So far nothing's burst, but I always have at least one burst. So even if you've been making these forever, there's always going to be one that's going to burst open and say, surprise, I'm here. Get the right tool for the job here, huh? And we'll place these once they're done, and you can tell they're done when they come to the top and they stay there. These are just about done. It doesn't take long. Now the water is not salted. We do have salt in the dough, but I don't salt the water only because it's a sweet ravioli. If you were making obviously a meat ravioli, I'd say do a healthy tablespoon of salt in the water so that it's salted. But with this, we really don't need it. And since there's no egg in the filling, we don't have to worry about cooking it to a certain temperature. Basically, it's just warming the filling up enough to melt the brown sugar that's in it. But when we make the filling ahead of time before we start the pasta, just by the liquid in the pumpkin that's there naturally will also help to dissolve the sugar, so you don't get any kind of grittiness inside your ravioli. So we're going to go ahead and lift them out and just put them in the strainer and let them drain for a couple of minutes before we plate them. And we'll go ahead and we'll just boil some more while I'm plating this up, because the caramel sauce is done. We're ready to rock and roll here and try our pumpkin pie ravioli. And as you can see here, the butter has separated a little bit from the brown sugar. We don't need to put it back on the heat. What we need to do is just whisk it a little bit It's not a true caramel sauce, so because there's no heavy cream in it, so it will not look like a caramel sauce. Now, if you want to make caramel sauce, by all means do that. You can, if you don't know how to make caramel sauce, it's not hard. You can also buy pre-made caramel sauce and thin it out a little bit with some warm half and half or milk. So this is not going to be a completely emulsified mixture because it is a sauce, a brown sugar sauce. Then we're going to take some of our ravioli here and we're just going to lay them in the sauce like this. And we're obviously going to need a lot more sauce. And then we'll go ahead and top it with some beautiful toasted pecans. And that is our pumpkin pie ravioli. Absolutely delicious. So let's go ahead and cut into one of these. Let's go ahead and cut into our ravioli so you can see the inside. Again, this is a very delicate flavor and a very delicious, good dessert ravioli. So please make this for your family and friends the next time you have a family gathering. It's an absolute delightful thing to experience. This is Chef Deborah from Rokus Bakery in Greensboro, North Carolina, signing off for this episode. Please visit us on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, or our website at rokusbakery.com, where we have our online store, as well as our photo gallery. You can watch all of our episodes from season 1 on the TV tab. And visit us next time you come to North Carolina. Bon appetit.